I watched my wife treat me like an employee in our own home. I refused her contract, filed for divorce, and started building a mutual respect future. My wife sat me down last Tuesday with a notebook, a pen, and the kind of serious expression you'd expect from a corporate executive about to deliver quarterly projections. What she said next would completely destroy our marriage, but not in the way she expected. "We need to talk about renegotiating our marriage contract," she announced, opening her notebook like she was chairing a board meeting. I almost laughed, thinking she was joking. The dead serious look in her eyes told me otherwise. For 8 years, we had built what I thought was a solid partnership. We shared responsibilities, supported each other's goals, and handled conflicts like adults. Sure, we weren't perfect, but we worked, at least I thought we did. Over the past few months, she'd been spending hours watching videos about relationship empowerment and marriage upgrades. She joined online groups where women discussed leveling up their relationships and demanding better terms from their husbands. I noticed her becoming more critical, more demanding, but I figured it was just a phase. I was wrong. "I've been doing research," she continued, flipping through pages of handwritten notes. "I've learned that I've been undervaluing myself in this relationship. I need to renegotiate our terms because I've evolved as a person and I deserve better conditions." The way she spoke made my skin crawl. Marriage isn't a business contract you can just rewrite when you feel like getting a better deal. But she was treating it exactly like that. "What kind of terms are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the alarm bells going off in my head. She smiled, clearly pleased that I was engaging with her corporate approach. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. I've prepared a comprehensive list of adjustments that need to be made for our partnership to continue successfully." Partnership. She actually called our marriage a partnership, like we were discussing a merger between two companies. "I've realized that I bring significant value to this relationship," she said, tapping her pen against the notebook. "My research shows that wives like me are severely undercompensated for what we contribute. It's time to correct that imbalance." The confidence in her voice was staggering. She genuinely believed she was being generous by giving me the opportunity to meet her new standards, like I should be grateful for the chance to prove I deserve to keep her. "I've scheduled us for a proper discussion this Saturday," she announced. "I'll present my requirements then. You'll have time to consider them, and we can finalize the new arrangement." She stood up, closing her notebook with a satisfied snap. "I think you'll find my terms are very reasonable once you understand the market research I've done. Market research on our marriage." As she walked away, I sat there processing what had just happened. My wife had just informed me that she was planning to renegotiate our marriage like a business contract. She'd spent weeks researching how to extract more value from our relationship, and now she was ready to present her demands. The woman I'd married 8 years ago would never have approached our relationship this way. That woman understood that marriage was about mutual respect, compromise, and building something together. This woman saw marriage as a transaction where she needed to maximize her returns. I had 4 days to prepare for her presentation. 4 days to decide how I was going to respond to whatever demands she'd cooked up. She clearly expected me to cave, to accept whatever terms she laid out because she believed I couldn't bear to lose her. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I was genuinely curious to see what kind of deal she thought she could force me to accept. More importantly, I was looking forward to showing her exactly what happens when you try to treat marriage like a business negotiation. If she wanted to play corporate games, I was ready to show her how real negotiations work. Saturday arrived, and she transformed our dining room into what looked like a conference room. She had printed documents, charts, and even a small presentation easel. I walked in to find her sitting at the head of our table, wearing a blazer like she was about to pitch investors. "Thank you for making time for this important discussion," she began, gesturing for me to sit across from her. "I've prepared a comprehensive analysis of our current arrangement and identified key areas that require immediate adjustment." She handed me a typed document titled Marriage Partnership Restructuring Proposal. I couldn't believe what I was reading. "Let's start with domestic labor distribution," she announced, pointing to a pie chart. "Currently, we split household responsibilities roughly 50-50. My research indicates this is inequitable given my additional emotional and administrative contributions to our household." She flipped to the next page. "Going forward, you'll handle 70% of all domestic tasks. This includes cooking, cleaning, laundry, and maintenance. I'll focus on higher-level strategic planning for our household. higher-level strategic planning. She was actually trying to rebrand doing less work as having more important responsibilities. Next, we have financial management, she continued, completely oblivious to my growing disbelief. I'll be taking full control of our joint accounts and financial decisions. You can keep your personal checking account for small purchases, but all major spending requires my approval. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted complete control over money I earned while contributing less to actually maintaining our home. Social obligations represent another area requiring adjustment, she said, flipping through her notes. You'll attend all events with my friends and their partners. No more declining invitations or showing up late. These relationships are important for my personal growth and our social standing. I'd always been selective about social events, preferring smaller gatherings to large parties. Apparently, my preferences no longer mattered. Personal space and autonomy, she announced, highlighting sections of her document. I require 4 nights per week of uninterrupted personal time. You can occupy yourself elsewhere during these periods. I also need the master bedroom redesigned to better reflect my aesthetic preferences. 4 nights a week. She wanted me out of my own house more than half the time so she could have me time. Finally, intimacy guidelines, she said, her voice taking on a clinical tone that made my stomach turn. Physical intimacy will occur according to my schedule and preferences only. No pressure, no expectations, no discussions about frequency. I'll communicate my availability as appropriate. She closed the folder and looked at me expectantly, like she just presented the deal of the century. These are my non-negotiable terms for continuing this partnership, she declared. I've researched what healthy marriages look like in today's world, and these represent industry standards for progressive relationships. Industry standards for marriage. What happens if I don't agree to these terms? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Her smile faltered slightly. Well, then I'd have to seriously reconsider whether this relationship is meeting my needs. I'm not interested in staying in an arrangement that doesn't value my contributions appropriately. There it was, the ultimatum, delivered with corporate politeness. I see you're processing this information, she said, misreading my silence as consideration. I know it's a lot to absorb, but I'm confident you'll recognize the value proposition here. I'm essentially offering you the opportunity to be married to an upgraded version of me. An upgraded version like she was software getting a new release. These terms ensure I can be my best self in our relationship, she continued. When I'm fulfilled and properly supported, everyone benefits. Think of it as an investment in our future. She actually believed her own presentation. In her mind, she was being generous by giving me the chance to meet her new standards. She'd convinced herself that accepting her demands would somehow improve our marriage. I need some time to review this, I said, standing up from the table. Of course, she beamed. Take all the time you need. I know change can be overwhelming, but I'm excited about where we're headed once we implement these improvements. As I walked away from her makeshift boardroom, I could hear her humming contentedly while she packed up her presentation materials. She was genuinely pleased with herself, convinced she'd just solved all our relationship problems with her corporate approach. She had no idea what was coming next. Over the next few days, I did exactly what she'd suggested. I reviewed her terms carefully. I considered the implications, and I even did some research of my own, but not the kind she was expecting. For the next 5 days, I let her believe I was seriously considering her proposal. She'd check in periodically, asking if I had any questions about her terms, or needed clarification on any points. Her confidence grew with each passing day. I'm really proud of how mature you're being about this, she said Wednesday morning, patting my shoulder like I was a good employee who'd accepted a demotion gracefully. Most men would react emotionally instead of logically analyzing the benefits. What she didn't know was that I was conducting my own analysis, just not on her terms. I spent those days consulting with a divorce attorney, understanding exactly what our assets looked like and how they'd be divided. I organized our financial documents, made copies of important records, and quietly moved some funds into a personal account she didn't have access to. I also did some genuine market research. I looked at rental properties in better neighborhoods. I researched what single life would actually cost me. I calculated the real financial impact of her demands versus the cost of ending things entirely. The numbers were eye-opening. By Friday, I had a complete picture of our situation and several options for how to proceed. More importantly, I had a strategy. I'm ready to discuss your proposal, I announced that evening, using the same formal tone she'd adopted the week before. Her face lit up with satisfaction. Wonderful. I knew you'd come around once you had time to process everything rationally. Let's schedule a proper meeting for Sunday, I said. I want to give your proposal the thorough response it deserves. She practically glowed. I'll prepare some additional materials to help clarify any concerns you might have. Sunday morning, I set up my own presentation area in our living room. I had documents, a laptop, and even borrowed her easel. When she walked in and saw my setup, she clapped her hands together excitedly. "Look at you being so professional about this," she exclaimed. "I love that we're handling this like adults." "Please have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I've completed my analysis of your proposal and prepared a comprehensive response." She settled in eagerly, notebook ready to take notes on whatever minor adjustments I might suggest to her perfect plan. "First, I want to thank you for your detailed presentation," I began. "It really helped clarify some things for me about our relationship and where we stand." She nodded approvingly, clearly pleased with my respectful approach. "After careful consideration of your terms and conducting my own market research, I've identified several areas of concern," I continued, opening my laptop to display a spreadsheet. "Oh, what kind of concerns?" she asked, leaning forward with interest rather than worry. "Well, let's start with a basic cost-benefit analysis," I said, turning the screen toward her. "Your proposal, essentially, reduces your contributions to our household while significantly increasing mine. From a business perspective, that's what we call a declining value proposition." Her smile wavered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I think you're misunderstanding the strategic value of my new role." "Actually, I think I understand it perfectly," I replied, "which brings me to my counter-proposal." I pulled out a folder and placed it on the coffee table between us.
"After analyzing your terms against current market conditions and alternative options available to me, I've concluded that
Your proposal represents an unacceptable deal." "What do you mean, unacceptable?" she asked, her confident tone beginning to crack. "I mean the return on investment doesn't justify the required expenditure," I explained, using her preferred corporate language. "Your demands increase my costs while decreasing the benefits I receive from this partnership." She stared at me, clearly not expecting this kind of pushback. "We can adjust some of the details if you have specific concerns." "That's very generous," I said. "But I'm afraid the fundamental business model is flawed. I've decided to pursue a different strategy entirely." "What kind of strategy?" she asked, and for the first time since this whole negotiation began, I heard uncertainty in her voice. I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. "I'm exercising what I call the termination option." The color drained from her face as I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table between us. "What is this?" she whispered, staring at the documents like they might bite her. "This is my counter-proposal," I said calmly. "After conducting a thorough performance review of our current arrangement, I've determined that termination is the most logical business decision." "You can't be serious," she stammered, but I could see the panic creeping into her eyes as she realized I wasn't bluffing. "Let me walk you through my analysis." I continued, pulling out a detailed spreadsheet. "You wanted to approach this like a business negotiation, so let's examine the actual metrics." I turned my laptop screen toward her, displaying a comprehensive breakdown I'd spent days preparing. "Current performance evaluation," I began. "Domestic contribution, 30% and declining. Relationship satisfaction scores, consistently negative trending. Cost of maintenance, exponentially increasing. Return on investment, approaching zero." She tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "Financial analysis shows that your proposed terms would increase my operational costs by approximately 60%, while reducing service quality by roughly the same margin. No rational business would accept those terms." "This isn't a business," she protested, her corporate composure finally cracking. "You made it a business," I replied matter-of-factly. "You presented terms, demanded negotiations, and treated our marriage like a contract to be optimized. I'm simply responding using the same framework." I pulled out another document from my folder. "Market comparison analysis," I announced. "I researched alternatives to our current arrangement. Single life offers better cost efficiency, higher satisfaction ratings, and significantly reduced operational stress." Her mouth opened and closed without making a sound. She was finally understanding that her negotiation strategy had backfired spectacularly. "Risk assessment indicates that accepting your terms would lead to further demands, decreased performance, and eventual relationship failure anyway," I continued. Early termination mitigates those risks while preserving remaining assets. You're talking about our marriage like it's a failing company, she said, her voice breaking. Your words, not mine, I reminded her. You scheduled formal negotiations, presented terms and conditions, and demanded I either accept your deal or lose you. I chose option 3, find a better deal elsewhere. I leaned back in my chair, watching her process the reality of her situation. But we can work this out, she pleaded, abandoning her corporate persona entirely. I can adjust my requirements. I'm afraid the negotiation window has closed, I said, using her own professional language against her. Your initial proposal revealed fundamental misalignment in our business objectives. Continuing this partnership would be throwing good money after bad. She stared at the divorce papers, finally understanding that her power play had completely backfired. What about everything we built together? She asked desperately. That's covered in Section 4 of the dissolution agreement, I replied, tapping the documents. Asset division, timeline for transition, and termination of all shared obligations, very clean, very professional. I don't understand how this happened, she said, looking genuinely confused. I thought you'd want to keep me. That was your critical miscalculation, I explained. You overestimated your market value while underestimating my alternatives. Basic negotiation error. The irony was perfect. She'd spent weeks researching how to get more from our marriage, but she'd never considered that I might decide she wasn't worth the price she was demanding. What if I withdraw all my demands? She asked frantically. We can go back to how things were. Impossible, I said firmly. You've already shown me how you really view our relationship. You see me as a resource to be optimized, not a partner to be respected. That's not something you can just take back. She tried one more desperate angle. But I love you. Your proposal suggested otherwise, I replied. Love doesn't come with terms and conditions. Love doesn't require renegotiation. Love doesn't treat the other person like a vendor who needs to prove their worth. I stood up and gathered my materials, just like she'd done the week before. Your termination becomes effective once you sign those papers, I said. I think you'll find the severance package quite fair considering your recent performance metrics. As I walked toward the door, I could hear her crying behind me, but I didn't look back. She'd wanted to play hardball business negotiations with our marriage. She'd just learned that I was better at business than she was. The next 3 days were a masterclass in watching someone realize they'd played themselves out of the best deal they'd ever had. She started with anger, calling me unreasonable and accusing me of overreacting to her reasonable requests. When that didn't work, she shifted to bargaining, offering to modify her terms or abandon them entirely. I was just testing our communication, she claimed Tuesday morning, cornering me in the kitchen. I wanted to see if we could work through difficult conversations together. Testing, I repeated, pouring my coffee without looking at her. Interesting way to describe presenting an ultimatum with printed charts and formal documentation. Maybe I came on too strong, she admitted. But we can fix this. I'll tear up my proposal and we can start fresh. The proposal was just the symptom, I said, finally meeting her eyes. The real problem is that you thought you could strong-arm me into accepting whatever terms you dictated. That tells me everything I need to know about how you see me. She tried a different approach that evening, waiting until I got home from work to ambush me with what she probably thought was a romantic gesture. She had made my favorite dinner, set candles, and opened a bottle of wine. I thought we could talk through this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I said, walking past the elaborate setup. You made your position clear, and I made mine clear. The conversation is over. You're being stubborn, she said, following me upstairs. Relationships require compromise. You're right, I agreed. They do require compromise. Your proposal had zero compromise in it. It was a list of demands with a threat attached. By Wednesday, desperation had fully set in. She showed up at my office during lunch, crying and begging me to reconsider. I've been talking to my sister, she said, sitting across from my desk like a client pleading for more time to pay their bills. She helped me understand that I was approaching this all wrong. Your sister helped you understand that threatening your husband with divorce unless he accepts your terms might backfire? I asked dryly. I wasn't threatening divorce, she protested. I was trying to improve our relationship by giving you an ultimatum to accept my demands or lose me, I clarified. That's literally the definition of a threat. She tried to grab my hands across the desk, but I pulled back. Please, she begged. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Marriage is supposed to be about forgiveness and second chances. Marriage is supposed to be about mutual respect, I corrected her. You showed me that you don't respect me enough to discuss changes like an equal partner. You tried to dictate terms like I was your employee. I was just confused, she insisted. Those online groups filled my head with bad ideas. I see that now. Those groups didn't force you to print out formal demands and schedule negotiations, I pointed out. They didn't make you treat our marriage like a hostile takeover. You chose to do that. Thursday brought her final desperate attempt. She enlisted her mother to call me, hoping family pressure might change my mind. She's devastated, her mother said over the phone. She knows she made a mistake, but don't you think divorce is a bit extreme? Did she tell you what her mistake was? I asked. She said you two had a disagreement about household responsibilities? I had to admire the revisionist history. Reducing her corporate-style ultimatum to a simple disagreement about chores was impressive spin. She presented me with a list of non-negotiable demands and told me to accept them or lose her, I explained. I chose option 3. Find someone who doesn't think marriage is a business negotiation. But she's willing to forget all that now, her mother pressed. Can't you just move past this? I could, I said, but I won't. She showed me exactly how she views our relationship when she thought she had leverage over me. I don't want to be married to someone who sees me as a resource to be managed, rather than a partner to be respected. Friday evening, she made one last attempt, catching me as I came home from meeting with my attorney. The papers don't have to be filed, she said quietly. We could just pretend this never happened. But it did happen, I replied. You spent weeks planning how to extract more value from our marriage. You researched negotiation tactics. You prepared presentations. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. I was stupid, she admitted. I got caught up in all that online nonsense about women deserving better. I forgot that what I had was already good. No, I said firmly. What we had was good. What you wanted was me accepting a worse deal while convincing myself I should be grateful for the privilege. So, that's it? She asked, tears streaming down her face. 8 years of marriage over because I asked for too much? 8 years of marriage over because you tried to bully me into accepting demands instead of talking to me like your husband, I corrected. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She'd gambled our entire relationship on the assumption that I needed her more than she needed me. She'd bet wrong. 6 months later, I ran into her at the grocery store. She looked tired, older somehow, like someone who'd learned an expensive lesson the hard way. How are you doing? She asked awkwardly, clearly hoping for some sign that I regretted my decision. Better than expected, I said honestly. You? She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Good, really good. I'm focusing on myself, personal growth. The same buzzwords that had started this whole mess. Some people never learn. I'm glad, I said, meaning it. Everyone deserves to be happy. Have you been dating? She asked, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. Actually, yes, I replied. I'm seeing someone. The pain that flashed across her face was immediate and genuine. Reality has a way of hitting harder than theory. Is it serious? She pressed, clearly hoping the answer was no. Very, I said. She's incredible. We're talking about moving in together. What I didn't tell her was how different this new relationship felt. My girlfriend understood that partnership meant working together, not one person dictating terms to the other. When we disagreed about something, we talked it through like adults. When she wanted changes, she approached them as requests for discussion, not demands for compliance. That's fast, my ex said, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. When you know what you want, you don't waste time, I replied. She shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling with what to say next. I learned a lot from what happened between us, she finally said. I realize now that I handled things poorly. I'm glad you learned something, I said. That's what matters. Do you ever think about what might have been different if I'd approached things differently, she asked. It was a fair question, and one I'd considered myself. Honestly, I think you showed me who you really were when you thought you had power over me, I said. Even if you'd gotten what you wanted, you would have just come back with new demands later. That's how people like that operate. People like what? She asked defensively. People who see relationships as zero-sum games where someone has to win and someone has to lose, I explained. You weren't interested in improving our marriage. You wanted to improve your position in our marriage at my expense. She stood there silently, probably realizing that I was right. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, genuinely meaning it. But I also hope you figure out that you can't negotiate your way into genuine love and respect. As I walked away, I heard her call after me, I really did love you, you know. I turned back one last time. I believe you loved me, I said, but you loved the idea of controlling me more. 3 months after that encounter, I proposed to my girlfriend. She said yes immediately, tears of joy streaming down her face, no negotiations required. The contrast was striking. Where my ex had tried to leverage our relationship for personal gain, my fiancé saw our partnership as something to protect and nurture. Where my ex had presented ultimatums, my fiancé offered compromises. Where my ex had demanded I prove my worth to her, my fiancé worked to prove her worth to our relationship. The difference between someone who loves you and someone who wants to use you becomes crystal clear once you've experienced both. My ex learned the hard way that when you treat marriage like a business transaction, you might find yourself getting fired. She wanted to renegotiate our relationship because she thought she held all the cards. She discovered that the person with the real power in any negotiation is the one willing to walk away. The last I heard, she was still single, still attending those online empowerment groups, still looking for someone willing to accept her terms and conditions. Some people spend their whole lives trying to negotiate their way into happiness, instead of just building it with someone who wants the same things. I chose to build instead of bargain. Best decision I ever made. You can't renegotiate respect. You either give it and receive it, or you find someone who will.